There's so much here I'm trying to wrap my head around.
It's a big story, and I know if you don't get it the first time, that's totally understandable. I didn't.
Yeah, so when you tell this to people, do they say, what are you complaining about? You're a crazy conservative? What do they say to you? Are they incredulous? They say that didn't happen, although you have photo documentation. Like, what is the response? Like, my response is like, holy shit. Welcome to Conversations with Peter Boghossian. I just had an incredibly sobering and intense conversation with Dr. Chris Martenson from Peak Prosperity. I hope that you enjoy it. Thank you. Chris Martenson, so good to sit down with you finally in person after all those years online. So I want to start by, you had an extraordinary experience in Panama. Tell us about that.
I did. You know, it was one I resisted for a long time. I'm good friends with Michael Yon, phone friends, right? Like a lot of my post-COVID friends, we know each other really well. And he'd been saying, Chris, you got to come, you got to see this thing going on. And you know, Michael's like this decorated war correspondent, been there, done that. And he was increasingly urgent. And then he said, okay, we're going to Panama. You got to come. Brett Weinstein's coming. At that point in time, I think also Peter Jordanson was supposed to come,
right,
but didn't. And then Brett started leaning into me, and he'd send me these cryptic messages like tent-making bats. I'm like, what's a tent-making bat? Well, it turns out Panama is where Brett Weinstein did his Ph.D. thesis on tent-making bats. So he's like, if you come, I'll give you a personal walk through the woods. And I'm like, well, that's a bucket list item I have to put on and check off. You know, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I went, and it was just nonstop action right from the get-go. So first thing, Michael Yon plans like nobody I've seen. Every single detail, everything we needed. I get off my plane.
Yeah.
I'm picked up right away at the gate by a brand new shiny, SUV with a snorkel on it and a ex-Special Forces guy driving. It was Lance Holden. And 4 hours, we go south and we head down towards Darién. We get to this hotel that's kind of questionable, right? You know, good news, had a shower. Bad news, no shower head. Good news, excellent water pressure. Bad news, no hot water, right? Like it was like right at the edge.
Yeah.
Wake up the next morning, drive further with 8 other people, and we go into this little tiny shanty town. And there's just, some dogs around, tin hut, a Chinese sign, and there were dugout canoes there.
In Mandarin.
Yeah. So that was the first clue that, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore, right? Something weird was going on. And we walk down to the water, and there are dugout canoes with 15-horse Evinrudes on the back. We load up, and 4 hours up a jungle river, caimans, parrots, right? We had to get out 4 times and push because the water was low due to the drought that they're having. And so there we are, up to our thighs in water.
To what end? You were doing this, why?
Because Michael wanted us to go see one of the prime camps.
Okay.
So when I say camp, what I'm talking about is these people come from all over the world somehow, and they're coming up through Colombia, and they have to walk the last 30 miles or that 130-mile stretch. It's called the Darién Gap.
Okay.
No roads. There's a mountain range that goes up about 4,000 feet, and the people have to walk up and over that range. And then this would be one of the first camps they come to. And so here they can, hey, there was Wi-Fi in this camp, there was, rudimentary, but there was food that you could get there was money you could spend, but this is where you would rest for a second or two, and then take the same boat trip we took, and then there would be a bus waiting for you there, which would take you on the next part of the journey. So this was the first place people came to, and Michael took us to this one because this camp, there's 4 of these camps.
Could you just walk in there?
You could. We just walked in.
Were people looking at you because you're a white guy?
We got some extra stares, but you know what, Peter, all these people were they were just so worn out from their trip. This is a really exhausting trip. So we were talking with one woman, and she just said, you can't understand the exhaustion. You're walking. You probably ran out of food and water at some point along the way. People are just shedding things. She said the trail is just littered with things that were just too heavy to carry. The water bottle, articles of clothing. People are just leaving things. She came across one woman who was busy cutting her hair off because the weight of it was too much for her. So these people are exhausted.
And the end point, the telos, the goal is the United States.
That's where they're going.
Okay.
Yep.
So walk me through now.
This is a really strange process. So when we asked a bunch of people, talked to a guy from Chile who was Haitian, he'd been in Chile for 7 years, talked to people from Venezuela, from Afghanistan. They all had the same story, which was somehow on their phones, through social media, they found out that It was open border. And now if you ever wanted to go to the United States, now's the time. And as well, there are also instructions coming through from NGOs like the Red Cross and all this. They give you maps, they tell you how to do it. But it always involves this walk. And I couldn't figure that part out because it's a perilous walk. Bad times of the year, up to 10% of people might have died. The rivers are swollen. They're warm weather people going over 4,000 feet, even though we're in Panama. Yeah, in November, it might be 40 degrees at night.
Wow.
So hypothermia. So these people are encouraged or enticed in some way that now's the time they're going to make this perilous journey. So everybody I talked to who was willing to talk seemed like they're just normal people. My heart went out to them. They were seeking a better life and all of this and that. But why make them take this journey?
I was just wondering that myself. Is it because you couldn't get into, I'm guessing obviously, because you couldn't get into Mexico to do that? You had to kind of walk to Mexico?
I mean, there's some legal legerdemain. So people would fly into Quito because Ecuador doesn't have a visa requirement.
Right.
So you could get off the plane, but now you're in Ecuador, so you got to get up through Colombia and navigate that whole process. But I think it's economics, at least on one level. So 1 million people came up through this route last year.
1 million people?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And
333 million Americans, so 1 million people came up through that route. Okay.
And when we asked them, they're just getting nipped at the boat ride costs, the bus costs, their food costs. They nipped. And so what's the average? And they said, $3,000 to $5,000. So million times 3 or 5,000 is $3 to $5 billion. So there's human traffickers, there's coyotes, there's the people nipping at the nips, right? There are all the people providing all the services. Now, what's fascinating was in Panama, they don't want these people to stay.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They want them greased right on through. So when we get to that camp, there's their Panamanian military presence. They don't really have a military, their police presence. But I mean, they're all in camo fatigues with weapons and everything, called Sena Front, which means border patrol to them. So Border Patrol was there, and when they found that we came into the camp, they said, come on in. We had to give them our passports and
Really?
Yeah, register in. And we were there. They had a nice little marker race board each month. How many people came through, and the sum at the bottom for this one camp.
Do you have pictures? You have pictures of this?
All of this, yeah. 68,000 people had come through that camp in 2023 that they had recorded. Not everybody actually comes through the camp. You can also bypass that, but that's what they recorded.
Okay,
It's shocking, right? It's just how to get your head around this, right?
Yeah, I am trying to wrap my head around it. And one thing I'm really trying to wrap my head around is, I'm trying to wrap my head around the Chinese connection. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. And I don't go to conspiracies easily, but I'll have you draw those lines. So if there are lines to be drawn.
So when we got there, we saw a lot of Chinese people. They were the most reticent to talk out of any groups, right? So we got lots of stories from other people. What I saw there was for about every 9 or 10 Chinese men, there would be 1 Chinese female there, right? And so how do you explain that? A lot of them looked kind of middle class, When you look, so Michael showed us on his phone that the Chinese version of that social media clarion call looked like an adventure ad. Yeah. They showed these people getting in the boats and their life jackets on and everybody's thumbs upping and they had this exciting music and they said, you can take this journey. So the one thing we know about China is people don't just get on a plane in Beijing and fly out. You have a store, they know why you're leaving. So this is sanctioned on some level for sure. And so these were sanctioned people who are leaving. A lot of them, Peter, they had better clothes than I have, They had really nice jackets. They
certainly have better clothes than me. This is from Goodwill, but yeah.
Hey, same thing. So here we go. But so we also saw guys there from China who had a clear, what I would call military demeanor. Well-muscled, very rigid eye control, and no interaction and stiff, carriage and all of that. So it's clear that, one interpretation of this, and this could be wrong, but we know from the one child policy in China that they have 100 million extra guys, right, of this age group that we're talking about. Yeah. What do you do with 100 million excess guys?
Well, you do what Castro did in the 70s. You empty your prisons of the criminally insane and et cetera, and you send them to Miami. I mean, that's what I would do. Well, if I knew the borders weren't secure and I was a thug or a tin pot dictator, I'd empty my prisons like the guy in El Salvador. I'd empty all those people. I'd send them right through.
So listen, not conspiratorial, but this is fact. China is sending its males here to the United States. Why? Maybe for wives. That would be the least interpretation of this. But for sure,
the most benign interpretation.
the most benign. But there's clearly something else going on. So while we're down there, China is all over this whole region now.
They're
building ports. They're building roads. They're building bridges. They're building libraries. Right?
Yeah.
This is how China rolls. The business of China is business. That's how it was explained to me by a fairly high-level Chinese person at one point. And so the way they do that is, they said flat out, what they want is they want these regions to become China.
Right.
They don't want to take them over. So what do? They get the game down. They understand this is about, you want to put people in all sorts of different positions of authority in various bureaucracies in various places, and you just slowly become. So we asked one Chinese person who would talk, and hey, how long do you expect to go from, in this case we were at a separate camp called San Vicente. This is the one that Mayorkas visited. Big camp. Buses just coming and going. And one Chinese person said, we asked the question, how long from here to United States? And they said, should be about 10 days from here to having a driver's license in New York City. Because they already had the whole route. So that's what I need to impress here. This isn't just like some people walking up and going north. These are routes that are established. The camps, the buses, the actual places you stop. The Chinese had maps that showed them which were the friendly hotels they could stay at, where they could provision. And when they get into the United States, which DMV you go to, all of it, right? It's a route from A to Z to land with what you need. Like I said, it changed me. I like that response.
Yeah, I guess, I go around in the world and we talk to people, and I never get any bright news. I never get any rays of sunshine. And then I hear this, and undergirding the whole thing is, I do not have confidence in my government to deal with this problem. I do not have confidence in my local leaders, my elected officials, and the Democratic person. I do not have confidence for them to deal with this problem. I mean, forget this problem. We can't even deal with problems of trivial consequence. So, okay, so let's take a step back. So where did you fly out of? Back home.
So, well, I flew to Miami, and then Miami is a straight shot south.
Okay, so it must have been a fascinating experience. Like, you're walking around, and some people were looking at you, but they were just tired and weary. And did anybody approach you and ask you anything or say anything to you?
No, but they were very willing to talk. They wanted their story to be told.
Sure.
And
did you tell the FBI, not that they would do anything, or the CIA? Did you tell any of the authorities that this insane migration? Did you tell anybody about this?
Who would I tell?
I don't know who you'd tell. They probably wouldn't listen to you anyway, which is the problem.
That would be it didn't even occur to me to call somebody, because they've been knowing about this. So when you look at the macro data, starting literally at the time of the inauguration until now, it's been roughly 2 million people per year have been coming over the border.
Right.
Yeah, somewhere between 1 and 2, but closer to 2. And that's the ones that got interdicted. Not everybody actually gets caught, right? So, but when they're interdicted, what does that mean? It means that they found them, they put them on a bus, sometimes they gave them a cell phone, an EBT card, and maybe a plane ticket to go somewhere. So when we got there, you saw that there's 61 NGOs. This could be Catholic, the Catholic organization, there's Red Cross is there, but the biggest of the big is the UN IOM. Right? And they got billions of dollars. And that's headed up by a woman named Amy Pope, who talks about this really clearly. She says, migration is a positive thing always, and we want to harness the power of migration. That's from their strategic report they just put out. I'm like, what's the power of migration? So, well, migrants, when they come into community, they make it better. And I'm thinking, Native Americans might have a different point of view about this.
Well, I was thinking
displaced people often.
I noticed the word legal wasn't in there, but okay.
Well, and this is important because we have to distinguish. So this is one of the things I know you know more about. I caught on to this from you when you explained equity to me in that great steel manning session, right? I didn't know what equity meant. Yeah. So now I'm very careful, and I watch when they change the words.
Yeah.
So now they're saying the power of migration.
Yeah.
Let me separate that from immigration.
Yeah.
I have my grandparents immigrated, I have friends who are going through the green card process.
Yeah.
That's a process.
Yeah, my grandparents, all my grandparents went through that.
Yep. 2 Ellis Islands for me. But that's a process. And today it's probably 70 boxes of things you have to do, right? You got to go here, you fill this out, you do that, there's a test, it's a big, long process. Immigration is great. I love immigration. But that's like, it's no different than you have a business, you're hiring somebody, or you're a landlord and you bring in a tenant in, right? What do? Anybody unvetted?
Yeah, legal immigration, I was thinking when you're saying that.
Yeah, no, they're talking about migration.
No, I know.
Migration, biologically, is the mass movement of animals from one spot to another, usually for resource reasons, right? So they're saying the power of migration, by which they are explicitly saying an unvetted process, anybody first come, first serve, and as fast as possible. Now that's been going on for years.
What's the point of that? I mean, what would they say the point of that would be?
Well, their story is that this improves the lives for everybody. But they say it very clearly in the IOM documentation. They say there are these 17 SDG goals for the world that they want to do through the UN, right? Sustainable Development Goals. And they say migration satisfies like 12 or 13 of them. It's like this cure-all. It's the ivermectin of human, movement. They just wanted to do all these things, and one of them is equity. They say very clearly this helps to equalize nations, but be careful about this, because what they're saying by default is we want to take people from poor countries, and we move them in, and then through the process of remittances, this country comes up.
Right.
But by default, this country comes down.
Right.
So this is an explicit unvoted for policy by the UN to begin to enforce equity at the national level, and they think this is the way you do it. You uproot people, you convince them to take this arduous journey, you shove them into the host country, and everything works out.
Okay, so one of the things that you said that that's still lingering is, you said that there was documentation that the people had with like the Red Cross or something. So they're complicit in it. Not only are they complicit, they're actually aiding and abetting illegal activity.
Not only that, but their words and just total incoherence, Peter, total. So they say, oh, this is good, this is a positive for the people. At the same time, they're handing out rape kits to the women on the Colombia side, because the chance of them being raped during that 30 miles is very high. These rape kits have morning after pills, male and female contraceptives, and some basic instructions on how to care for yourself if you've been injured. Wow. That's the level of care we're talking about. These people are psychopaths. The words don't match the actions. And again, if this is so positive, why spend $3,000 to $5,000 trying to take an arduous journey? Why don't we just fly into LAX? Why don't we just make it an official policy? Land these people in Houston. Fly them into JFK.
So there's so much here I'm trying to wrap my head around.
It's a big story, and I know if you don't get it the first time, that's totally understandable. I didn't.
Yeah, so when you tell this to people, do they say, what are you complaining about? You're a crazy conservative? What do they say to you? Are they incredulous? They say that didn't happen, although you have photo documentation. Like, what is the response? Like, my response is like, holy shit. How do people respond when you tell them that? Like, on your podcast?
Every single time. I have not run into anybody who's tried to take the other side of this and say, hey, let me tell you how maybe
why this is good.
Why this is good. Nobody. Everybody's like, this is not right. This is not good. Because, I mean, come on.
It's insane.
Maine is building special units to start housing these thousands of people who are showing up in Maine. And they're going to give them 2 years rent-free, and they're going to give them cards and all this other stuff. At the same time, you can go to Portland, Maine, and see homeless vets living on the street, scratching out a miserable existence. What kind of a country puts this much effort in? So there's 3 levels to this. First, a nation that doesn't have a border can't call itself a nation.
It's not sovereign, right?
2, when you have too many people of any culture come in, I say, oh, let's put Christians and Christians together, right? Well, is it Joel Osteen's church trying to match up with Old Order Mennonites? This is, you're going to have a, putting the wrong kinds of fish in the aquarium problem for a while, because as Michael Jan says, he says, it's just like, it takes time for cultures to assimilate and adapt, and there's an overwhelm function. We're clearly at overwhelm, and this is a European thing. You can see this in France, you can see this in Germany, not Poland, because they are not allowing this, right? It's an important part of the story, but England.
Hungary isn't allowing it either.
Right. Yeah. So that far right-wing Orban, right? Yeah. So they're doing that, and then the final thing in this is the subtle message which says we care more about other people than our own citizens. So this is operating at multiple levels. And it's fundamentally trying to say, your nation is not a nation anymore. This is a program to undermine the nation.
Yeah, I really don't like to guess the motivations of other people. I would much prefer that the people tell us their own motivations rather than me speculate as to what those are. So,
But on that point, remember,
Yeah.
so what I'm riffing off of here is that we had this WF world famous 1.5-minute video in 2016. They said, you'll own nothing and be happy.
Yeah.
And then they said, oh, you'll eat a lot less meat, maybe insects, right? But number 8 in that list caught me. And number 8 was, Western values will have been tested to the breaking point by 2030. I'm like, well, why Western values? I don't see China having a migration problem. I don't see Indonesia having a migration. Why is it just Western? So this is clearly a Western program being run by some people who want Western values to be tested to the breaking point. Because
Western civilization, I'd argue, but yeah.
possibly. So I'm this guy. If they tell me they're going to do something and then it happens, maybe that's why they did it. And so that's what I'm at. That's my context for that statement.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point. When people tell you what they want, whether it's Hamas or you should believe them.
Believe them. Yes.
I do think that there's something in the liberal mind that cannot fathom when someone tells you why they're murdering someone, that they actually believe them, or that in a religious context, a truth of a religious proposition, people say, oh, they don't actually believe that, or they don't really believe that. But when someone tells you what they're doing, believe them. You don't happen to have photos of those Red Cross thing? You do? Oh God, that's just genius. Can you share those with me?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Be happy to.
So let's say, I can't even begin to tell you how to address this problem. I mean, this is so far out of my area of expertise. It's unfathomable to me. The only thing I can possibly think of is contact some authority, but why? But do the authorities know? They must know about this.
Of course they know about it. And of course there must be people within those organizations, Border Patrol, FBI, who are chafing at this, saying this is not right,
And so, okay, so if they know about it, and I'm just trying to think about this as a sincere citizen who does not want to see my country go in, bad things happen, let's put it, that's probably the most politic way I can say it. Is there a next step for us? Like, someone watching this, what can they do? Can they call their, I have no idea. Do they call their congressmen? Do they call their senators? Do they go, tell us your website where people can see this stuff.
peakprosperity.com, that's my website. And you can find me on Twitter, Chris Martenson, YouTube, all that. But Peak Prosperity is where I put stuff. And I have to, by the way, I have a lot of stuff I put for subscribers only behind the paywall.
Okay.
Because I just get canceled and censored.
I know.
Like there's conversations we're not allowed to have in public anymore. So I've created a place where I can have those. And
yeah, that's really good. We just did something in, Travis is a documentary filmmaker, and he does documentaries about people who transition and can't put on YouTube. We just, it's a crazy thing. It's really the legacy media, and I would include YouTube in that, is really making sure that certain narratives get forward.
Well, and this is a hot button for them. So there's a couple of things you can't really talk about on YouTube. You can sort of get away with some stuff about COVID now. They've relaxed a little, but they're hypersensitive about voting machines and the migrant issue.
And I'll tell you, the other thing is the trans issue and the detransitioners, although the New York Times just had a story about that. Okay, so...
But let's carry this.
Yeah.
So let's think about it from the progressive standpoint. I care about these people. They're tired, hungry, yearning to free, come to the shining city on the hill. That's my story.
Right.
Where do these people go?
You mean once they get into the U.S.?
Do they go to Martha's Vineyard?
I would ask, no, they do not go to Martha's Vineyard.
Do they go to Greenwich?
No, they'd go to where they have family, I would imagine.
They might. They'll certainly, but they're going to go to a place they can actually afford to live, or where accommodations have been made for them. But when we talk about this, when I say 10 million people,
accommodations like New York,
10 million people
Yeah.
since Biden took office, we're talking basically like Houston, a Houston amount of people had to kind of go somewhere. So they end up moving into, cut to the chase, poorer communities.
Right.
And they do compete with people who don't think they can make it on $7.25 an hour flipping burgers or doing whatever, because you can.
Yeah.
And they say it like it's a good thing. Oh, look, these are people doing jobs Americans don't want. But in fact, we don't have unwillingness to work problem in America.
Yeah.
We have a not paying people a survivable, livable wage problem.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you a question.
But
How
does this help the poor people of our country? If you care this much about the people,
Yeah.
how does it help to move more poor people into the zones of other poor people? I would feel totally different if Greenwich, Connecticut was throwing open its doors, and, saying we have a rule for every 1,000 square feet of space you have to take in one human, in your living dwelling or something. But that's not where we're at.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it the same people who were screaming about the importance of sanctuary cities, like the mayor of New York, et cetera? Now that they're flooded with immigrants, they've changed their story and asked the federal government for help. Is that not correct?
It's absolutely true, because now they're facing the reality of it. It was the idea.
Okay, so please help me with this, please, because for the love of me, I cannot understand this. Why don't you just say to them, look, you wanted this, you got this, now you deal with it. No paternalism, no, you literally were screaming at everybody, and whatever you think of Trump, whatever anybody thinks of Trump, I personally think he's a lunatic, but the whole idea that you would need to secure your border, as you said, you cannot have a nation state. So I guess my question to you is to help me understand, when the people who wanted sanctuary cities are then overwhelmed by migrants, why doesn't the federal government say, you got exactly what you wanted, what are you complaining about? I honestly don't get that. Like when the people vote in Portland, they vote for the same people, Ted Wheeler, he, him, his, who caused the problems over and over again. So that's what you want. So you have to, in a democratic system, you have to face the consequences of your actions. So you're getting them. So don't go to the federal government for, I don't get it. Because every time you every time you intervene in that, then people become less and less responsible for the choices they make. And that further corrodes the democratic process. So people have to be held accountable in a democracy for the choices they make. I mean, you could literally find a 10-year-old to understand that concept. With jelly beans.
This is what I've been struggling with too. So I don't know if I can help because here, okay, so let's talk left, right, or whatever it is. I don't know, the progressives, whatever we're talking about. There are a group of people who somehow grew up in a set of conditions which somehow prevents them from being able to connect the dots. They do the abstractions well. So they like the people. Yeah. When they're always talking about the people, they're talking about a faceless mob. They're not talking about people who have irises and a driver's license, not a person, right? So they want to help the people. So they do things like, let's just make the shoplifting felony limit $950. What could happen? And then the obvious happens. More shoplifting, downtown stores are leaving, you're getting hollowed out. So what do they do?
Yeah, and there are cases. There are cases when you go in. I went to a CVS and everything
everything's locked. I want toothpaste, it's locked, right?
Yeah.
It's unlivable. So instead of going, wow, the theory was a bad idea, right? They don't connect the dot. They talk about how they should make it a higher limit or something, right?
Okay, let me push back on that though. Isn't the way to deal with that to make them live with it?
Well, this is the fundamental tension. It's the abstraction versus the reality.
Yeah.
That's the consequence. So people are going to have to start living with the reality. The unfortunate reality is as of 2018, we had 22 million undocumented immigrants. We now probably have 32. 32 million.
That's
fully
just
10% of the
shocking to
country
me.
is now undocumented and doing the best they can. And I'm not saying they're bad people, but the
if you only had
policy,
0.1% of those people who are homicidal maniacs, you have a serious problem on your hands.
it's guaranteed that they emptied out the prisons south of us.
Yeah. Well, that's what I would have done.
That's what I would have just rationed.
I totally would have done that.
Absolutely.
And the insane asylums too. I would send everybody over here. Why not?
Absolutely.
It's only a good thing. Okay, so we have a serious problem. Nobody's dealing with it. Almost nobody is talking about it. And when you do talk about it, people accuse you of being a right-wing maniac. You know, one thing that I have become acutely aware of is the ideological capture of legacy media institutions. I remember in Portland, they were constantly telling us that the right wing is the most serious problems. When African Americans were assaulting Asians en masse, we were constantly told this was a white supremacy. I've come out repeatedly and on Twitter and social media, et cetera, and given talks about how, years ago when they were beating Jews in the street, that you make statements about universities, administrators will make statements about the smallest microaggression, but when somebody who's Jewish is targeted because they're Jewish, they say nothing. And now look where we are, right? So now we've gotten into the situation, and so my trust in any institution that is legacy is basically at negative. In fact, I'm almost at the point of certain media landscapes looking at it, thinking that the opposite is true. All right. So, is there anything hopeful? Do we have any ray of hope here that we can end on?
Well, this is yes. Because
Okay.
So here's the good news.
Okay.
These are all things we should have been talking about, and now they're coming up, and we have to talk about them. And now I think we're able to have a conversation. Post-COVID, here's what we learned.
Yeah.
We learned that we are surrounded by homicidal maniacs who will kill us because they make more money at it, right? Hospitals putting people on remdesivir and ventilators, even though that had an 85% kill rate, when they had other things provably that they knew did better. Why? They got 40 grand to do this rack. This one paid less, right? So we have to start talking about the kind of culture we have. There's a great awakening. People are talking about things again. You know, I just did a talk here a few minutes ago, and I was talking about Federal Reserve. I consider them monetary vandals. They're throwing generations under the bus.
Would love to have that conversation.
Oh, it's great. And first question from the audience is, how do we return to a moral set of decision making? Right? Monetary policy, straight to the moral. So we're getting there because it's totally moral question, right? This is a moral question. Should we be enticing these people to leave their lives? If you really cared about them, why wouldn't you help them in their own countries find prosperity? By the way you get prosperity in that country is not by shipping it from this country, because you know what creates prosperity? Rule of law, private property rights, intellectual property protection.
P.J. O'Rourke had a great little book about that.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but they're busy, like these people, the best I can say is we're led by midwits. They know not what they do, but at worst, they have a program. And the best I can tell you, this isn't very hopeful, they hate this country, they hate white males, they just hate, and they don't know how to build, but man, they're good at wrecking stuff.
Oh, they're excellent. Black belt level.
Black belt level, that's what I see happening. So the good news is people are recognizing that, and we're saying, no, stop. And so it's time to push back against that.
Yeah.
We have to.
Chris, thank you so much. I really appreciate what you do. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, thank you.
Thank you for watching. Everything we do is under the umbrella of the National Progress Alliance, nationalprogressalliance.org. It's a nonprofit, independent 501c3. Your generous donations keep us going and keep fueling content like this. So please help us out. Make a donation. We very much appreciate it. Thank you.